This is a coca plant, from which cocaine is derived. For many of Colombia's poor, coca crops are the only way to make a living. Farmers started growing coca crops in this part of Colombia, Tumaco, in the early 2000s. Soon after, guerrillas from the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, or FARC, moved into the territory. For years, there were conflicts between the Colombian government and the FARC. All too often, this led to violence. In 2016, a peace agreement was negotiated between the FARC and the government. In the agreement, the government promised regional development plans and crop substitution programs to help dismantle the illegal drug economy. Many Colombians clung to the hope of lasting peace. This is Roger, an Afro Colombian leader, and Joanna, a peasant farmer. They live in Nariño, Colombia. These are their stories.
I used to work on farms in Putumayo, but there was too much violence and my family wasn't safe. Our friends suggested we start again in Nariño. So we left. We migrated, along with many others like us, to Alto Mira. We found a small farm with enough land to grow coca and food crops. Our children were out of harm's way. We were a happy family for a while, but a few years later, my husband and I split up. I was heartbroken. Growing coca and food crops is hard work. My children helped me to keep going, to keep working the farm, but the work was getting harder. I couldn't keep up. That's when I found out I had cancer. I used all our savings to pay for medical treatment. We were going hungry, so I looked for help. Some people rejected me. They blamed us for bringing coca crops and the increasing violence to the area. But I found others who were supportive, people who helped each other. Soon the FARC were in the area. The community paid taxes to them using coca farm profits, and they intervened in local conflicts between communities. Things were okay. Then the government planes arrived. The planes flew over our farms, spraying our crops with glyphosate herbicide. They wanted to kill all the coca crops, but they killed everything, even our food crops. The armed conflict between the FARC and the government flared up again. After everything we'd been through, we still couldn't get away from the violence.
I knew something had to change. The way things were between the FARC and the government, it couldn't go on. Still, I had doubts about the peace negotiations in Havana. Communities like mine weren't even invited. While the FARC and government talked about peace in Cuba, in Alto Mira nothing changed. But then, at the last minute, they opened a small space in the negotiations for ethnic minorities. Finally, we had a chance to give our views on peace. In the peace agreement, the FARC pledged to disarm. No more conflict, no more violence. In return, the government pledged to help develop our regions and stop the illegal drug trade. The day it was signed, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, peace was possible. Then the referendum was held, and Colombians rejected the peace agreement. I couldn't believe it. I thought they must be living in other places without the violence and chaos we knew. I think that's when I started losing hope for lasting peace.
I never had much faith in the referendum. I always told my kids, nothing will ever change. After people voted against the peace agreement, the FARC didn't disarm straight away. I think they were scared. A modified agreement was passed by Congress, and many FARC moved to a nearby demobilization zone and gave up their weapons. Conditions were bad in the demobilization zones. They built sheds to live in. Other armed groups started attacking them, and peace commitments remained unmet. So some of the FARC picked up their guns again. These groups were all fighting for control of the illegal drug economy. Campesinos like me, we didn't have much to feel hopeful about then.
I first met Joanna when we started going to local meetings. She was with her community group, I was with mine. We discussed things like farming development plans and the voluntary coca crop substitution programs that the government organized. Instead of sending in planes to spray and kill our crops, the government promised to give us resources so that we could eradicate the coca crops ourselves and plant legal crops instead. We received the first payment, but it wasn't the amount they promised. There was a second payment, but it was delayed. What's more, there were farmers who wanted to sign up for the crop substitution program, but they weren't included. I went to more meetings where they talked about building an aqueduct and an irrigation system to help boost legitimate local economies. But the building work never started. People told us, "You're naive to trust the government." They were right. Promises were either broken or unfulfilled. The government left us with no coca and no other way to make a living. So we organized protests.
Soon after the protests started, the Colombian army started destroying our crops again. We organized a picket line to try and stop them. We told them that we wanted the substitution program and no more violence. The army started firing at us. We were unarmed protesters. I even took my children along. The Colombian army killed some of the demonstrators, and they blamed FARC dissidents.
So here we are. Coca crops continue to grow. Every week, peasants involved in the government's farming development programs and voluntary crop substitution program are killed. The army is eradicating our crops with force and shooting at us when we protest. And former FARC combatants who disarmed are also being killed. We get caught in the middle. COVID-19 has made everything worse. All the promises made in the peace agreement have been broken. We've gone backwards. Things are worse now than 10 years ago. Today, this is no man's land. All these massacres of young people, and now this lockdown. I don't have much hope for the future. Peace is still far away from me.
Today, Nariño's Pacific region is overwhelmed by violence, poverty, drug trafficking, and now COVID-19. Despite growing threats of violence, Afro Colombian leaders, peasant farmers, social leaders, and indigenous activists continue to organize and advocate for their communities. Meanwhile, illegal economies continue to profit from the territory, and peace remains elusive.